मेरे में एक्चुअली चल नहीं रहा. कैन यू टेल मी व्हाट्स द प्रॉब्लम इन माय प्रोग्राम?
Sorry, your application is not running.
या.
Okay, share your screen. No?
ओके.
So go to the browser and you make a request for the slash. So you need to make a request for 8080 slash. Enter. Okay, go back to your server. So go to application properties and run it in a different port number. Yeah, write server.port is equal to, give some other number, because generally 8080 might be occupied by some other server which you have installed. Okay, save it, stop it and return it. Okay, this one is running on 8080 only. Okay, stop it again. Clear it. Okay, right click on our application. I think there is some error in the Spring Palm file. Go to the palm.xml. No, you might have opened a different Palm here. Can you just right click here on the left panel? Yeah. Come to the bottom. Yeah, open it. Okay. Okay, scroll down. So there is some error here. I think you have not. Okay, go up. You have written one parent tag. Okay, parent has ended. Okay, can you right click and update the Maven project once quickly? Yes, perfect. Okay, now right click and run your application. Don't run it from here. Okay, right click. Yes, perfect. So where is it running? 8090, right? Okay, now go for slash. Colon 8090 slash. Okay, go for Postman and make a request. Yeah, click on the plus button. Yes. Type the URL. Localhost colon 8080. 8090, sorry. Slash, make a request. Click on send. It's telling us that this particular URL is not available. Okay, let's see. I think you have given any, show me the code. Have you written any? Okay, this just a REST controller is there. You can see there that even a dispatcher servlet is also got initialized there. Request mapping method. Okay, can you write one more method? Do one more get mapping at the rate get mapping. So show me once again the request, sorry, palm.xml. Let's see whether you have added all the dependencies properly. So you need a Spring Boot starter web. Perfect. So come down. Okay. Yeah, this is correct only. Right. There is no issues here. Okay. I think, yeah, I told you one thing. So you need to create a sub package now. So where have you created a package? Where is your controller? Is it in the sub package of demo? You're not created a sub package. That's why it is not getting automatically scanned. So make it as a dot बोले तो sub package होगा. आपने किया है underscore. Can you restructure it? Refactor, rename, click OK, make it as dot. Dot बोले तो हाँ उसी को भी small case बना दो. So we will not give a capital for naming our packages. वो नेमिंग कन्वेंशन है, स्मॉल ही लिखना है. सिर्फ इंटरफेस एंड क्लास को लिखना है कैपिटल. So right now what has happened, and in your DTO also you need to make it as a small case. No, that dot you need to give. सब पैकेज बनाना है, डेमो के अंदर बनाना है. राइट क्लिक करो, रिफ्रैक्ट करो, डेमो डॉट DTO बनाओ. रिफैक्टर, रीनेम, डेमो डॉट DTO. हाँ परफेक्ट. अभी स्टॉप करके रीरन करो. हाँ राइट क्लिक. हाँ perfect. Yes. So now go and make a request. It's okay, there itself you can make a request. Tab open करो, localhost 8090/. So इस बार जरूर होगा क्योंकि it is doing a scanning of your base package or a root package and its sub packages. So आपने बना दिया अलग ही package, so that package won't get scanned there. Clear है? Nikhil, I think you have to unmute and speak.
Yeah, sir. So
हाँ हाँ
com.example.demo का अंडर हमें
हाँ
सारे पैकेजेस
हाँ,
बनाने
उसके
हैं.
अंदर ही करना है आपको. हाँ.
Okay, and
So
this
suppose if you are doing a sub package, no, so इसके अंदर ही आना है.
so this dot means कि ये जो next package जो बना है ये डेमो के अंदर है.
अंदर है ना. हाँ.
Okay, sir. Thank
See,
you.
if you look at the, okay, let me show you that also. Right click on the project, right click on any of your package, root package में open करो. हाँ इसको open करो, right click करो, no right click करो. हाँ करो. हाँ open in, show in, go to show in. हाँ system explorer करो. हाँ अभी देखो क्या है उसमें, expand करो. हाँ डेमो के अंदर कंट्रोलर है, DTO है. ठीक है ना.
Yes, sir.
पैकेज बोले तो एक अलग फोल्डर है, सब फोल्डर है बस.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.
So that's why it is now, because you have written a REST controller annotation ना, वो REST controller bean बन जाएगा, and inside that you have written one handler method. वो पढ़ के, so it has created one mapper method. So that's why it is now working. Earlier it was not working because it was not under the package. Okay, right. Any other questions, guys? Shall we continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's say I want to create some employee service. Correct, no? So employee DTO to ready hai. You can see here. Okay. So now let's say I want to create a service. So demo के अंदर एक package करूँगा. So इसका नाम बोलूँगा service. And इसके अंदर I will create one interface. And this one will be my employee service. So this will be my interface. So इधर आपको करना है implement आपको लिखना है जो भी आपको सर्विस चाहिए. So let's say according to my specification, I have one method to get employee. Get employee by ID. And it throws employee exception. So you have to give me integer employee. So I have created this employee class. Let me import it. So I have not created this exception class. Let me create it. So where I want to create it in a package called as demo.exception. Then let me create it. So my Eclipse has created this package and also created one class here, and also it extends this exception. So मुझे पूरा template मिल गया. So what I need to do, I need to create one constructor of this particular exception. So बहुत ही simple constructor बना रहा हूँ. And it will going to take whatever message you are sending me and taking it to the exception, and exception से वो throwable से चला जाएगा. So if you do a get exception message, so get message, so you will get this custom message. So this is my service. Okay, this is my service. So this is the method that I need to implement. Get employee by ID. So similarly, I would like to create employee also. Employee, add employee. Let's say you give me the object of employee. So let me implement this service. A class बना दूंगा. I call it as employee service IMPL. इसको implement करना चाहता हूँ. I will write implements employee service. So जो भी आपने ऐड किया था employee service contract में, इधर implement करना पड़ेगा आपको. So this is get employee by ID and this is add employee. ठीक है. So and this is the employee service. You want to create the bean of it. Spring bean you want to create. So which is the right annotation? Of course, I can write @ component here, guys. So what is the name you would like to give to this component? You can give it. So what is the data type of this component or this bean? It is of type employee service. Correct, no? Right. So where I want to inject this, I want to inject this particular bean in my controller. Where is my controller? Here is my controller. So where am I supposed to use this? So this is my create employee. Instead of printing this employee here, so I want to make use of that particular service. Return this dot, I will write employee service dot create employee. To use that particular service here in my controller, आपको क्या करना पड़ेगा? You have to write private. I need the employee service. So I am doing inversion of control. उसकी मतलब क्या है? Where did I do the inversion of control, guys? Using annotation. So I did the inversion of control here. So इसका मतलब है इस ऑब्जेक्ट, इस क्लास का ऑब्जेक्ट मेरा स्प्रिंग फ्रेमवर्क क्रिएट करके दे देगा. सो कहाँ पे रखेगा? वेब कॉन्टेक्स्ट में रखेगा. वेब एप्लीकेशन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इसका बीन रखेगा. सो कहाँ पे आप इंजेक्ट करना चाहते हो इसको? So I want it to inject it to my controller because I want to use it here. इसका एम्प्लॉय कंट्रोलर में एक डिपेंडेंसी है. एम्प्लॉय कंट्रोलर हैज अ डिपेंडेंसी फॉर एम्प्लॉय सर्विस. सो इधर आपको करना है डिपेंडेंसी इंजेक्शन. कैसे करना है? आपको सिर्फ एक अनोटेशन लिखना है ऑटो वायर बोल के. वो ढूंढेगा बीन को ऑफ टाइप एम्प्लॉय सर्विस. इफ इट फाइंड्स अ बीन ऑफ एम्प्लॉय सर्विस, इधर आपको इंजेक्ट करके दे देगा. And also we know that by default my spring will always create a single turn or a single occurrence of your employee service by default. So there are two types of scopes that we can create a bean. One is a singleton by default. Otherwise, one more type is called as, what is one more type is called as, guys?
Prototype.
Very good, prototype. Okay, so either I'm asking my Spring framework to auto wire it, detect it and automatically ये configure कर लो बोल के. वो क्या करेगा? पहले वो ढूंढेगा. So when it is scanning all my sub packages ना, इसको पता चल जाएगा we are asking it to create the bean of this. ठीक है? So इसको बाद में हम बोल रहे हैं इसको इधर इंजेक्ट करो बोल के. So बाद में हम क्या कर सकते हैं? So this reference variable will be pointing to the object of my employee service implementation class. So इधर क्या करना है मुझे? So मुझे कॉल करना है employee service dot add employee. So इधर मैंने लिखा है void. So create employee. After creating, let me reply you with the employee object. So add employee, what it is returning. Okay, ठीक है. So it is throwing one exception, but I'm not handling it here. Okay. So what my Spring Boot says, so if there is any exception, so then there should be one centralized exception handler for my REST controller. So I have to create one REST controller otherwise. So simply instead I can, if I throw this, or for example, if I write throws employee exception. So this is your controller method. And if a add method returns you this exception, then it will also throw it. So if my create employee controller method throws it, so then it will go to the JVM. And my JVM will going to terminate your application. Or my JVM will going to do the necessary steps. Okay, so now we will see this, how to handle this exception further later. Otherwise, let me just, either I can throw it or else I can also do the handling like this. So instead of doing a trace, let me print it for time. sys.out key.get message. Okay, so now it is 1 second. If I have to return this, so I have to write it outside here. And it is giving me the object of the employee. So let me create a reference variable of my employee here. Employee. So let me initialize this to null. Okay, this name is also employee here. So that's why it is giving me error. Let me make this as new employee. So initially my new employee will be null. Then I'm going to create this employee object. And then finally, I'm going to return this new employee object. So आप पोस्ट करेंगे एक एम्प्लॉय डेटा, मैं उसको बाइंड कर रहा हूँ एक पैरामीटर के लिए. सो बाद में वो एम्प्लॉय डेटा मिल जाएगा मुझे. सो आई एम कॉलिंग दिस एम्प्लॉय सर्विस एंड पासिंग ऑन टू माय सर्विस लेयर. And if the service layer returns me the object of the employee, then I'm pointing to that, and then I'm going to reply you back with that employee record. So now let's go to the add employee service. So this add employee service, I want to get it done through my DAO layer, correct? Guys, am I right? Where you want to keep this employee data?
In database.
हाँ, in database. आपको पहुंचाना है a data को to the database, correct ना? So now what I need to do, I need a repository, or I need a logic to save my data or persist my data into the database. So I want a JPA and Hibernate का combination चाहिए मुझे, correct ना? So what I will do, I need to add one dependency for that. I need all the libraries ना, JPA and Hibernate का libraries चाहिए ना. So if you want to use those libraries, you need to add those dependencies into my project. So pom.xml में check करो वो dependency है कि नहीं. So we have not added. This is a dev tool and this is for creating a RESTful application. उसका dependencies नहीं है. So you will not be able to integrate with JPA and Hibernate. So what do you need to do? You need to find, and we know that to use this JPA and Hibernate, so we have a dependency called as Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. Correct now? So what we will do, let's go to that application. Where did we do that? Okay, not this. We did one demo program now. Where is that? Okay, I think we should close
JP
these things.
Hibernate was the name.
नाम क्या था? Sorry.
JPA Hibernate.
JPA Hibernate.
वो शायद सर Eclipse में कराया था आपने.
ठीक है, परवाना. So what we need one dependency for data JPA, correct now? So now let's see how to add that particular dependency. So मुझे चाहिए data JPA. Okay. Otherwise, let's go to Google and find it out. So I'll go to Google. I will search for Spring Boot data JPA or dependency. मुझे चाहिए इसका dependency बस. Okay. So you can see here, if you go to the Spring IO documentation also you will get it, and also you will get it in a Maven repository also. Okay, okay. Let me go to the Spring IO website. Let me leave that website here in your chat box, guys. So like this, you should do the self-study. Okay, right. So मुझे क्या चाहिए? I want to see what is that dependency I need to add it to my POM file. Okay, this guy is not giving me that. Second. Okay, he's telling me to how to generate this entity class. Okay, right. अरे एक मिनट. So you can see that this is the dependency which I am looking for. So इसका नाम है Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. You just have to take this. So you can who is the creator of this? This is all.spring-framework.boot इस project के अंदर. So this is the root project. इसके अंदर वो create कर रहा है Spring Boot Starter JPA. Okay, so पूरा dependency को copy कर लो. One second. It is always better you close all these files. And better you open it properly and appropriately you paste it. So you can see Spring Boot Starter Web is there. So next to it, I want to add this particular dependency. Okay, and this version is 252. Okay, let me save this. So if you look at your dependency, guys, so now it is pulling it from my Maven repository. So you can see now it would have added your Hibernate. Sorry, guys, I lost the connection. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was showing you guys that it will basically get me the dependencies needed for my JPA and Hibernate integration with my Spring Boot project. Okay, I will tell you what is this data later. So, and also it is showing me one warning. So this warning says that overriding a managed version 271. Okay, so my base version, what we have added here is 2.7.1. So let it take it from this parent element about my version. So let me remove this. So let me save this. So now we have added a dependency for my data GPA. So as soon as we do this, we know that what we are supposed to do here. If I try to run it, it will going to throw me an error now. So what is that error it will going to show me? It will going to talk about giving a specification of my data source. Automatically, usko pata chal jayega that you have added a dependency of data JPA. So data JPA को चाहिए आपका data source. So all of you please observe. So let me see what is the error it is giving. Fail to determine suitable driver class. Can you make a guess, guys? What is that it is talking about? I've shown you this error earlier also. ठीक है ना? Earlier it was running fine now. What is the problem now? The problem is you have added one dependency of your Hibernate. So, and that Hibernate is trying to auto, you can see here, Spring Framework Boot, auto configure. It is trying to auto configure your JDBC driver. So, and that's JDBC driver is trying to find the driver for suitable driver for getting connected with the database. So you have not given those properties. आपको वो सब सारे properties को डालना है इधर. I think उस दिन we had a problem with our Spring tool soup. That's why we did it in our Eclipse. So let me take those properties here in my resource. So I have to identify which is the data source. That means which is the URL, what is the username, what is the password, and what is the driver class thing. So let's take all these things and put it here. And also I want my Hibernate to create my tables automatically. So I would like to use this. And I want my Hibernate to show those SQL statements. I will do this. And also if I run also, it will not going to work because so we are specifying that this is the JDBC driver, but we have not downloaded it. So if you want to download manually, you can do it. Otherwise you get it done through my Maven. So we know that if you go to the pom.xml, so I will get that particular connector here. So here also we are getting one error, duplicating managed version 8.09. One second, 8.029. Okay. So let me take this dependency for my SQL connector. So in my Maven project, I'm adding that dependency as well. Because I'm connecting with my Oracle, sorry, my MySQL. So if you want to connect it with your Oracle, you have to download the JDBC for your particular database. So let me try to rerun it now. So you need to understand this database queries. One second. So it should have told me, yes, you can see Hibernate ORM core version has been used here. Hibernate annotations. So you can use Hibernate annotations. It started some Hikari pool framework as well. So this particular Hikari pool is the framework that is used by our Hibernate to connect to our database. You guys can do a self-study on this Hikari pool, guys. So basically it will going to create a pool of connections because when you're running your online application, correct now, there might be multiple requests coming to my server. So for each of those connections, my Hibernate has to create a separate connection with my database and it has to execute the queries. So easily my Hibernate will going to use this Hikari pool to create a pool of connections. Okay, so now, and also it is using, you can see MySQL dialect. So my Hibernate is capable of communicating with the various available databases. So it's using a specific SQL or optimized SQL queries for your MySQL. So let me also remove this. It is showing me that you are managing a duplicate versions there. So let me save it. Let me format it. Yes. So internally, what is happening? What has happened just now? If I go to the Paint application, I know that there is a Tomcat server. This is my Tomcat. And in that Tomcat, I have a servlet engine.
So inside the servlet engine, there is something called as our Spring Boot application is running. And in that Spring Boot application is nothing but our web application context. So web application context is nothing but a memory in which all my beans of my web applications are running. So inside that, you can imagine that there is one bean called as a dispatcher servlet. This is my front controller. This is my dispatcher servlet is running here like this. So, and it will going to get the request like this. So this will be of your HTTP request. So my dispatcher servlet, or we have also created one more bean guys here. So this bean is nothing but my REST controller. This is my controller. Let me call this as my REST controller. So inside this, I have all the handler methods. So otherwise, I can also call it as handler mapper. Inside this, you have written all the handler methods for my incoming request. Correct now? So what it will happen? So all the requests which is coming to the dispatcher servlet will go to my handler mapper or my REST controller. So there is a bean of my REST controller. What my REST controller is doing right now. So we also creating one more bean. And this bean, we are calling it as a service bean. And this particular, whatever request you are going to get, that particular method will going to call a method in my service. So that particular request will get handled by a particular service method. So this is my service bean. So from this particular service, we cannot persist my data. What I'm doing, so I'm creating one more bean of my dove layer. This is your repository. This is also a bean of type Spring Bean. So what will happen now? So the same request will get forwarded to your repository like this. What my repository will do, my repository will going to communicate with already existing beans. Okay, so automatically my Spring Boot is creating few more beans for us. So that bean, you can call it as my JPA, or you can think about, let me show you that particular bean here. So you can see here, there is something called as JPA Entity Manager Factory. So it will going to create one Entity Manager Factory bean for us. So my repository is dependent on this particular Entity Manager Factory. So in this particular Entity Manager Factory, we have something called as an Entity Manager. Using that Entity Manager, I will get the job done. So basically what this entity manager is doing, so entity manager is dependent on one more bean. So this bean, I'll call it as a data source. So this data source bean will get created using all your properties. You can see Spring data source. You're also giving the JDBC driver also here, guys, and the URL where it needs to connect, and the username and the password. Using this, what your data source will do, it will get connected with your particular database. So using JDBC, what it will do, whatever JDBC driver you have added, it will get communicated or it will get connected with your MySQL database. So this particular data source bean will get injected to my entity manager. So that's why I can also write in a representative way, I will be able to write it like this. So it's all the way going down, and some of the layers have already been developed by my Spring framework. That means we don't have to create this entity manager factory. It will automatically create for us. So this data source automatically it will get created for us. So you just have to give me the specification. So this from this particular repository onwards, so entire thing will be hidden from me. So all these things will get automatically created for me. And also this particular portion is also getting created for me automatically. Am I clear, guys, here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm supposed to do now? So I've already added the dependency for my JPA and Hibernate. So entity manager factory भी create हो गया है, data source भी inject हो चुका है. So then I just have to get the entity manager from this particular entity manager factory. How to get it injected into my repository? So I know how to do the auto wiring. So you just imagine that this entity manager is also having entity. So entity factory has got a manager, and that manager you can get it injected. So how to do it? Very simple. So apne project me. So you create one more layer. So let me create one more layer. Let me call this as my DAO layer. So here you need to create one interface as usual. I will call this as so let's say this one will going to give you method like add employee. So we know this particular layer, correct? No? So employee, add employee. So I want to create the add employee and a get employee, two methods. So let me just implement only those two repository methods. This is add employee. So similarly, so I can also return you a Boolean. Okay. You can create a new exception class, guys, that is thrown by your repository. You can write employee repository, create employee repository exception. That is also possible. Okay, it's up to you how you want to implement this. So now let me implement this. Let me go here. Let me create a class. Let me write employee repository IAM here. So this also I can write it as @component. Guys. So you can see in a Spring framework, I have an annotation called @component. So it will going to create a component of this type. So I want to implement my employee repository. So now the data type of my employee repository implementation is this. So this is a type of this. So it is going to create a component of this object or this class. And then wherever I auto wire it, so it will going to inject it for me. So now here what I want. So I want to implement all these unimplemented methods. So what I want to do here. So I want an entity manager here so that I will be able to persist my data. So I want to get that entity manager injected. So I have one annotation called as @persistence context. PRSI persistence context. So what is the purpose of adding this persistence context? Express a dependency on a container managed entity manager and its associated persistence context. So it is going to give you an access to that persistence context, guys. So you can manage a particular object and you will be able to persist it, you will be able to remove it, and you will be able to merge it. So all the operations you will be able to do it with respect to the managed objects. So now what is the data type that you want to inject it here? I want to inject something called as entity manager. So it is nothing but your auto wiring. Okay. But it is a special annotation to indicate that you want this persistence context. So let me add this, import it, this entity manager from JavaX persistence. So JavaX means your JPA. This is the specification. Accordingly, my Hibernate has developed the implementation classes. So either आपको entity manager मिल जाएगा. So that means you will going to get the access to your entity manager factory. If you say persist, my Hibernate will going to create a query to insert a record into your database. Find by ID, it will going to create one query to select this particular record from your database. Then of course it will going to return you back. So going forward, so let's say suppose someone calls add employee. What am I supposed to do? I need to use this entity manager to persist it. Because this is a Spring Boot application, I also have to manage that particular transaction in a higher level. I should not manage that transaction with the entity manager. Usually what do we do? So we make our service as a transaction, because my entire service should happen successfully. Otherwise, everything should get rolled back. So this transaction will get handled in my Spring framework in a service layer. Okay, what I'll do, I'll come back to my employee service. Okay, so in this particular service, on top of my class itself, I can write it as @transactional. So my Spring Boot will take care that every method will be a transaction. If something goes wrong, that means any exception happens, it will going to roll back for you. Okay, either you make, if you want all your methods to be treated as a transaction, you write the @transactional in the class level, @transactional. So my Spring Boot will going to take care that, make sure that each method will become a transaction. So, but I don't want it to happen for get employee by ID. ये तो सीधा साधा method है. So I don't want to make it as a transaction. So whereas I want to make this as a transaction, let's say. So that is because I'm adding it, I want to save it to my database. So I will write @transactional. So you are calling add employee. So let me come from my controller once again. So this controller. You're posting me some data. So as soon as you send my data, I'm calling a service method. I'm calling in the service, I'm calling a method called add employee. So this add employee, so this is the method. I need to call the repository to add it. So what I'll do, I have injected, okay, I need to first of all auto wire my private private employee repository, employee repository, to write employee repository. So this particular employee repository has to be injected now. So I will write it as @autowire. So there needs to be a bean of this particular type, then only it will be able to inject it here. So let's see whether we are creating it. So let me go to the DAO layer. So this is my DAO layer. So on this implementation class, I'm writing it as component. So I'm creating the bean of this particular data type. So I'm injecting into my service. So now I can use the repository to add this employee. Let me write this dot employee repository dot add employee. So this particular add employee is throwing me an exception. Mismatch cannot convert from Boolean to employee. Okay. So let me also make this as Boolean.
So,
Yeah.
why there are two different down layer in this folder?
Two DAO layers are there. Okay, I think by
Two
mistake.
down layer down.
Oh, 1 second. Okay, why did I create two? Let me refresh. It is not very simple. Have it got created? 1 second. I don't need two of them. 1 second. Yeah, गलती से ये STS ने दिखा रहा था. Okay, I just
Okay,
refreshed it. You can see there is only one copy is there. Okay, so now If I see here, so I want this add employee to return a Boolean data type. Okay, so now, so let me make this add employee to return Boolean data. This is also returning me true. So let me go to the implementation of my repository here. So this is my add employee. Okay. So now what I need to do, I need to use this dot entity manager dot, I need to do persist. Persist my employee object. Okay. So what this can do, it can throw these kind of exceptions. Entity exists exception, persistence exception, illegal argument exception, transaction required exception. ये सब ये throw कर सकता है. Okay. If there is no exception, if there is no exception from this, so then I will be able to return true. Otherwise, it can throw this particular sort of exception. Okay. Right. So now let me go to the controller. So my controller add employee. Okay, it's not giving you the employee type here. So I just modified that requirement here. So आपको ये boolean मिलेगा बस. Okay. So now what I can do. So let me make this also boolean. Let me here create one boolean. Is new employee created. Initially it will be false. So add employee will going to get you true. So if it returns you true, then you will be able to return that back to the customer or to the client. So overall what we did, so there is a REST controller. REST controller is there. So there we have done one post mapping. Aapko, you whenever a customer makes a post request on this particular URL, आपको भेजना है employee JSON object. So बाद में उसको receive करने के बाद, I will send it to my employee service. So in that employee service, I have written one add employee implementation. So what this add employee will do, it is written one method, which is a transaction, and it is calling a repository method called as add employee. What this add employee is doing, so it is doing me to using entity manager to persist my employee into my employee table. Okay, what my Hibernate will be doing. So suppose if I ask Hibernate to save this, my Hibernate will going to give me an error because this is not an entity class. It will not be able to manage this employee Pojo class because it is not at all an entity. It will be able to manage only if it is an entity class. You should annotate with entity. Right now I have not done. Let's stop it and let's rerun it. Let's see what will happen. One second, guys. Let me save all the files and run it. Look at the error. So there is no error. Okay, let me start. Let me post the data. Okay. So now let me go to the Postman. So I need to go for HTTP post, and I need to go for the URL like this. Correct now? Let me send. So now you can see. So it is responding with my internal server error. Look at the error code. So what is the error message? Unknown entity. So what is happening in my internal, in my application, it is getting to know, it is exposing our details into my customer. So this should not happen. You can see calm.example, it is getting to know that what is my package name and what is the entity name, etc. So basically, if I go to, as a developer, if I go to my console, I'll get to know what is the error. It is telling me that it is not able to save this employee Pojo class or Pojo object. So इसे क्या करना है? So what is my requirement? Requirement है कि, so whatever you want to get it persisted, you need to make it as an entity object or entity. You have to annotate that particular Pojo class with entity annotation. And I've also discussed that it is not only sufficient, and minimum thing is you need to declare an ID there. So this is the minimum thing you are supposed to do. So let's see whether it has restarted. So you can see it has not restarted. So let me save all the files once. Okay, you can see it has restarted, but still it is facing some problem.
Sir, ID is at line number 9.
Okay, I made it as ID, yes. Okay. So I've saved it all. Let's see whether we can restart it successfully. Yes, you can see it has started my demo application successfully. So now let's post it again. So you can see that it is sending me a value called a true. So that means this data should be there in my database now. If I go to Workbench. So I'm going to my Workbench. So let me check my demo database. And you can see that it has created me one employee table here. Okay. So let me go for select star from oh my goodness, 1 second. I think we already had a table. So let me truncate it and add it, guys. Truncate. So it has truncated my employee. So let me do select star from employee. You can see nothing is there. So let me post the data from my postman. And you can see you got the response as true. Now let me go to the database and go for select star from employee. You can see that this particular record got added. So there is an ID, there is a name, and there is a salary. Of course, you would have added this ID and DID as well, but it was all, this particular table was already there now. So it is using the same table because you have added one in the application properties. You have asked to update your existing data structure or data definition. Okay, if you go for create and drop, so there are various other parameters here, guys. So for example, instead of update, let's say there is a method, there is a attribute type called create. So if I go for this create data type, so what this create will do. So I want you guys to do a self-study on all these things. What will happen if I specify DDL auto equal to create? It will create the schema and destroy previous data. Okay. Similarly, I have a create and a drop. What will happen if I do this, give this parameter? It will create and then destroy the schema at the end of the session. So whenever you stop your application, it will also going to destroy the schema. Destroy the schema means so पूरा table को drop कर देगा. So whenever you are doing a trial and error now, so you can go for create and drop. Once everything goes fine, then you can go for update. Okay. So now, so सिर्फ create किया तो क्या होगा? So वो schema create करेगा, create and then destroy the schema at the end of a session. Okay, create. Okay, I think it's showing for create and drop. Okay, why it is not showing for create? One second. Okay, it's not showing me for drop. So similarly, guys, we have something called as update also. If I write update, what will happen? Okay, it's a problem with my STS, guys. It's always showing me the create or drop. Okay, one second. So you can also go to Google and look for it, guys. Go to Google. So Google में ये search करो. So basically, it's an Hibernate property that we need to set. DDL auto is expecting one enumeration data type. So what are all those enumeration data types I can send? Okay. See, these are all the values. I can write none. That means I don't want my Hibernate to automatically create my table. I can write none. Okay, similarly, I have a validate, I have update, and then I have a create and a drop. Okay, so what it will do, by default, you can see here, it will going to make it create and a drop. Okay, it's not giving the definition, guys. Give me a minute. One second, guys. So let me just check it. That particular STS is not working properly. So let me check it here, guys. Can you guys check it in your this one documentation, whether it is giving you appropriate document for update? Okay, what is the, can you just read for update, please?
Update the schema if necessary.
Correct. I will reinstall this, my STS today. Can you put that message in the chat box, please, if you don't mind? Put for all, for example, create, drop, none, and also for all your update. So basically, what is this? Update the schema if necessary. What is the meaning? The meaning is if you have altered your entity class, then if it is necessary, then suppose you have added any attributes. So it will sense that you have added an extra attribute into your table or your entity class. So then it will going to update your table accordingly. It will going to execute update statement on your table. Okay. So otherwise, if you go for a create and drop, when you start your application, it will create all your tables. And as soon as you stop your particular application, it will also drop those tables. So you're going to lose all your data which has been stored in your database. So based on your requirement, you can use this DDL auto statement. So now, right now, I think my application is here. It is called as update. So that's why it is updating my table there. So it is using the same table for inserting the data. Suppose if I drop this table. So drop table has executed. So now if I select this, you can see that table does not exist. So now what I'll do, let me save all my files and rerun my application. Because I've written DDL auto, so let me write create here. Okay, now if I run it, so you guys can observe, it will going to scan all my packages because you have written as a create. You can see here. So it is doing drop table if exists employee. Okay, if exists, it is trying to drop it. Otherwise, it is trying to create your table called employee here. So now I want to post one data. So let me go to my postman, and this is the data I want to create. So let me post it. So now it is sending me true. So let us see the console, what it is showing me there. So in the console, you can see that my Hibernate has executed one insert statement. Insert into employee, name, salary, and ID. If I go to the workbench, I should be able to see. So let me refresh my table. So you can see there is a table called employee. And this time it has created a new table only with my required attributes. So now similarly, if I go for this select star, I am able to see my record there. Okay, guys. So similarly, now I want to implement get employee by ID. So where is my controller? Here is my controller. So, okay, where is that get mapping? Okay. So if you can see here, I have a get employee method, but ID is not there. Correct now? So I need to correct this particular method so that anyone can get the employee by ID. Correct now? So now let me write one get mapping method at the rate get mapping. I want to write URL that is employee/ID. I would like to write one public method which returns me employee get employee by ID. I'm getting this ID in the path variable now. So let me write here at the rate path variable. So this is my integer. So I'll call this as ID. So my controller has to return. So I'm calling this dot employee service dot get employee by ID. So this ID, I'm going to send it to that method. And also you can see that this is also throwing one exception. That is employee exception. So the way you have handled your exception here, you can also do that. Okay, for time being. So let me throw that exception here. I will add it. I will handle this exception later. Okay, I will teach you how to handle this later. So right now it is simply throwing this particular controller is also throwing that particular exception. Okay, so now let's see. So what is that in the implementation we have done? So let's go to the service. So I have not implemented this service. So let's implement it. So what I'm supposed to do here, I have a repository here. So I need to call the repository method. This dot, yeah, I need to call the employee repository dot add employee. So here, sorry, get employee, sorry, get employee by ID. So this employee ID you need to pass here. I need to check this implementation. Click on the control button, click on this implementation. So this is get employee by ID. So here I need to use my repository and get the things done. This dot my employee repository. Sorry, my entity manager dot. So I have to get my entity. So what is the method, guys?
Find method we use.
We use
Sir,
the find. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, find by ID
Yes.
or just to find. Okay. So we need to specify employee dot class, then the ID. It is also capable of throwing this exception, illegal argument exception. Otherwise, it is expected that the found entity instance or a null if the entity does not exist. So it will be null or it will going to return me the entity object. So you need to understand that entity manager will going to create the object of the employee and it will going to read all those things and send me back. And automatically, whenever you go for a find, this particular found object of this particular ID will be managed by my entity manager. Okay, so it will come under managed entities. So now it will going to return back this particular employee to your service. So service will going to return back to your controller. So my controller will going to return back that to your postman. Okay, so now let's check whether it happens. So in the URL itself, you need to give me the ID. So what is the ID you have created? It is 305. So let's go to the postman. So here you need to go for a get method, and in the URL you need to send me the ID, that is 305. So from this URL, I want to extract this ID. So that's why I have written @path variable here. So the name I have given here and here both are same. So that's why I'm not writing anything here. So for clarity, if you want to write, you can also write it here. So now I think our database got restarted. I think I have also lost my data. Let me check it once again. You can see here. Because I gave my application property as create now, every time you restart, it will get recreated. You can see. So my table got dropped and it has created a new table. If this is what you want, then you can do that. So now what I have to do, I have to post it again and I have to retest it. So let me post. So now it is showing me true. So now if I execute this, you can see the data. So now in my postman, if I go for a get 305, I should be able to get the data. This is my response. You can see the status code and this is the data. So this is how we need to create all the RESTful APIs. See, suppose if I want to delete, so then I need to implement from that REST controller, I need to call a service method, and from the service, I need to call my repository method. So in that repository, I need to do entity manager.remove. If you want to update, so you have to do entity manager.merge. Can you complete this requirement, guys? Can you do this? Or you want me to complete this demo? Guys, can you please respond? So I have shown you how to get the employee by ID. So I have shown you how to add an employee. So let's say I want to update employee. Let's do this. Okay. The next method, what we want to do is update employee. What are you supposed to do? You have to send me one put request on this URL. So I'm going to get that JSON converted to my object. So instead of printing here, I'm going to call. So instead of void, I'm going to send you the updated employee object. So I'm going to return this dot my employee service dot update employee. You must be wondering, sir, we did not create that particular method, correct now? So you can see already my compiler or my Eclipse is showing that there is an error. Correct now, you have to implement this because that method is not there in the service. Guys, are you following?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me show you one more fun here. So because my Eclipse got to know that this method is not there, it is giving me an option to add this method to my implementation. Sorry. Okay, you can see the option here. Create method, update employee in employee service. समझ में आ रहा है ना? आप create भी कर सकते हो, नहीं तो आपको Eclipse मदद करेगा थोड़ा. You can do this. Okay, if you are getting confused, आप इधर जाके वो method create कर लो. इंटरफेस में पहले ऐड करो, देन ऐड करते ही वो आपको इधर एरर दिखाएगा, वो टेम्पलेट कोड आप इधर ऐड कर सकते हो. Okay, let me show you this way. So I can go and click on this. You can see it has added this method into my interface, employee service. Update employee, 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 आपको return करना है employee object. So let me save this. So as soon as you changed your contract now, so employee implementation में error आ रहा है. You can see it is showing me error. So इसका मतलब क्या है, ये contract को आपको पूरा करना है. So add the unimplemented method click करो, इधर आपको ये दिखा देगा. This is the template code that you need to add here. ठीक है ना? So let's see what we need to do here. So here I will write this dot employee repository dot update employee. So हम सबको पता है update employee is not there in the repository. Correct ना? So let me take the help of my Eclipse and add this method to my employee repository. Click on this. So इधर ये add कर लिया. So इसको सेव करो, वो बोलेगा आपको repository में उसको भी implement करना है. So like this method by method आपको implement कर सकते हो. ठीक है? So add this unimplemented method. आपको इधर you will get one template code, template method added. So in this you need to write your logic. So logic क्या है? What am I supposed to do? This dot entity manager dot. So I need to go for merge. So what I need to merge? I need to merge this employee. So update employee का काम ही खत्म हो गया. Let's try it, guys. So what is the method I'm supposed to try here? Post is for creating a new resource. What I want to do, I want to put it. Put. So ID वही रखना है. So if this ID does not exist, it will going to give me an error.
सर
Okay.
फर्स्ट
हाँ.
पहले पोस्ट चलाएंगे ना, बिकॉज हर बार टेबल
हाँ, correct. बहुत बढ़िया. Very good. Because it has recreated my table. Let's see the error ना. Post करके देखेंगे. Sorry, put करके देखेंगे. Put करना चाहता हूँ. And I want to put this record. So let me send it. So error आ रहा है. What is the error? No entity manager with the actual transaction available to current thread cannot reliably process merge call. I think that method we have not done it as a transaction. वो भी देख लेंगे एक minute. It is telling that it is not able to update it. It is not a transaction. So let me first write this as transaction. One by one handle करेंगे. एक error क्यों आ रहा है? ठीक है? So because it's not a transaction, वो गाली दे रहा है. So that you have not created that particular transaction. You can see here. ठीक है, मैंने fix कर दिया. Let's see what happens. So you can see it has created a table again. So let's post it. Let's try to update it. Let's see what is the error I'm going to get. I think this time, okay, my data was not there. Let's see what is wrong with this guy. I think, did I post or what did I do? I'm doing a put. 1 second, guys. Employee repository dot update employee, open implementation, update employee. So here we have a merge. So I didn't have that particular context, or I did not have that particular employee bean, employee record. How it could merge? 1 second. Okay, let's try to restart. Let's see what happens. So I have restarted it. So let me fetch it. Okay, this time, okay, my data is still there. So let me restart. Okay, it has created my database again. So there is no data in my table. Okay, so now let me go to my Postman. So I want to do an update operation. So this is my controller. So this is my put mapping. So this is update employee. Okay. So I think this particular entity manager, if that particular instance does not exist, it is automatically, so this is a merge method, no? So my this particular merge is merge the state of a given entity into the current persistence context. So if it is not there, it is creating it automatically. Okay. So if you want to make sure that you are updating an existing record, आपको पहले check करना है. If that does not exist, आपको ये exception message throw करना है. So otherwise, it is just trying to merge it with the existing database. Okay. So now let's try to post. Let's try to put it here. Let me send. So you can see it is getting saved here. So let's say I want to handle this. कैसे करना है? So let me go to the service. So in this particular service, before I update it, so I need to ask for this particular entity. This dot entity manager, sorry, this dot employee repository dot get employee by ID. By ID, I will be able to get it from this employee object, get employee ID. Okay, of course, this is also throwing an exception, guys. So if it throws, I should be able to handle it. Okay, so let me handle this later. So for time being, let me write it like this. So basically it should give me the employee object. So let me create employee. So this is my found employee. See, this particular find can also send me a null value, guys. You can see if the entity is found, it will going to give me the instance of that entity. Otherwise, it will going to send me null if it does not exist. Okay, what I'll do, if this is null, so then I should be able to throw an exception to my customer that that particular entity does not exist to update. Okay, so I can check and I can throw one exception here. If my found employee is equal to null, then I can throw new employee exception. Or did we create an exception clause? We created no. EMPLOYE employee And for time being, so I just want to display that this particular employee does not exist. To update employee dot get. So obviously, what happened? Change visibility of employee exception to public. Okay. So if that employee does not exist, so it should be able to throw it but that particular exception. Okay. So otherwise, I should be able to call this update. So in my implementation of the update, okay. Okay. So my table does not have a data now. So suppose if I try to put it, okay, why it is giving me this? Yes. You can see that. So we are just printing this as stack trace. So employee does not exist for ID 305. Okay. So in my implementation, so it is just printing it here. Instead of that, I should exit from this particular implementation. I should not update this. So instead of printing this stack trace, so the best solution is, so I should exit from this particular place. So what will I do? So for example, I will be able to rethrow this, or I should make this update employee throws employee exception. So let me write this in my interface also. So ultimately my controller should handle it. So for time being, let me add this to throws. Okay, so let's try to see what will happen. So I'm just once again updating my employee. Let me send it. So now, 1 second. So if this particular exception happens, guys, so I'm rethrowing it. Okay. So now let's see what will happen if I do the post. If I do the put, you can see there is an error. Employee does not exist for ID 305. So what happened? So when you try to, in my business logic, so I'm trying to find that employee ID. Okay, if it is found, then only I'll try to update it. Otherwise, I'm going to throw this exception and I'm going to immediately quit this particular method. So as soon as you quit, it is coming back. As soon as you throw an exception, it is coming back to my put method here, and my put method or this my update method is also throwing this exception. So I have to catch this exception in something called as REST controller advice, and I have to respond you with this exception message as a response from my REST controller. But as of now, it is printing on in this particular console here. My application here, my Spring Boot application will not going to terminate your server. Instead, it is throwing that into your console of your server. Because you did not handle it, my Spring Boot is trying to print it for the admin to handle it. So admin will going to get this employee exception. So that means programmer has not handled this. So we can write or we can create in a Spring Boot. We have a way to handle this. So that is done using by writing one more controller class. So this class is called as employee rest or employee controller advice. So this employee controller advice is also a REST controller, but it will going to write the methods. Those methods will be responsible to handle these exceptions. So this particular controller class is annotated with REST controller advice. So that means it is a class meant for giving advice to the REST controller if there is any exception. So my REST controller will also throw this exception. So this exception will be handled in my controller advice. So here, what am I supposed to do? I need to write one annotation called @exception handler. So what is that exception you want to handle? I want to handle the employee exception. So what is that? So it is a class. So I need to write one public method here. Public. So let's say it will going to respond to a string message. So this is a handler method. Employee exception. So here, so this particular method will going to get this exception object which you have thrown there. So here I will write it as employee exception. This is my object of the exception. So what you want to do, you want to return that particular e.getMessage back to the requester. So this particular bean will be responsible to handle the exception that is thrown in your controller. My controller is not handling those exceptions. Instead, it is throwing those exceptions. So these exceptions will be intercepted by my advice. And my advice, we have written a one handler, exception handler methods. So we are doing a mapping for our exception methods, exception objects. Suppose your controller is throwing this employee exception, then this is the method which is responsible to handle that exception. What it is doing, it is simply returning you the message what you have sent in your custom exception message. So it is extracting that message and sending you back. So now instead of printing this, what it will do, it will extract this message and send you only this message. So now let's retry to do that. Let's retry. So I want to update. You guys can see. So this is exception in your Spring Boot REST controller. REST controller का काम क्या है? उसको आपको requested resource services को देना है. Suppose if something happens, so then it has written a logic to handle those exceptions caused in any of your layers. So suppose there is an exception happens in a repository. Repository से वो service जाएगा, service पे controller पे आएगा, controller से controller advice को जाएगा. So controller advice, you will write the logic for your handling your exceptions. So ultimately what you want to do, you want to your error message to reach the requester. So yes, requested to update this. So now, but you are getting this message. Employee does not exist for ID 305. So now let's post it first. So this is the JSON. This is the URL. Let me post it. So now you guys can see that it has got posted successfully. So now let me update it and let me update this test name to let me update it as GL India. Okay, let me make this 55,000 to 75,000. I can also check the database once here. So this is your current data, guys. So in my service logic, I'm checking for this ID. If it exists, then only I'm going to merge this. So let me send this request. So you can see this is your latest updated data. So let me go to the database, look at your previous data, guys. So let me query it again. You can see that your data got updated. Am I clear, guys? Any questions here? So you can read about this REST controller advice, guys. And also, all of you please observe here, in my Postman, even though it's an exception, it is sending me the success status code here. I don't want to send this success status code. Suppose if something goes wrong, let's say I want to put 404 and send update. You can see employee does not exist, but it is coming that the status code is coming like 200. It should not come like this. I should send a appropriate status code. What I'll do, I will also send one response status. Response status. So in this, what is the response status I'm going to send? I want to send you HTTP status dot bad request, let's say. So now let's see what happens. So if you are trying to update this record, so you're going to get a status code as bad request. Why it is a bad request? Because this does not exist. So you give me any ID. So let's say 101. Guys, let me post this data. Let me post this record. I'm posting it. So let me get that 101, get employee 101. So like this, I want all of you to complete this delete method. Can you do this, guys? Guys, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what we will be doing is, now I'll post this. All of you please take a break. So relax करके आ जाइए वापस. So बाद में go step by step. पहले आपको कंट्रोलर अंडरस्टैंड करना है. So उसके बाद आपको सर्विस तो पता है. So from service आपको repository भी पता है. You just make a flow here, guys. So I have not implemented that delete method. आपको एक repository में एक method add कर लीजिए, service में भी एक method add कर लीजिए, and you delete me that record. ठीक है ना?
Sir, in application properties, in DDL auto, that create and destroy, that is destroying automatically in every restart, ना?
हाँ, restart drop
ये
हो रहा है. Yeah.
Data को.
हाँ. That's why we
Table
always
के
go
data.
for हाँ update कर दो. So ये drop नहीं होगा.
अच्छा, तब delete का वो
Delete का वो problem नहीं होगा. Yes.
Sir, I want to ask.
हाँ, please.
So what is the real use case of using this create? It will be
See, let's say you are doing an experimentation with a new project. आप create हो रहा है कि नहीं देखना चाहते हो. So during that time you can use it. आपको confirmation मिल गया So you don't have to go for create and dropping it. So
Like we are
consistently,
working, if we are working in live project, then we need to use update.
हाँ update use करे तो चलेगा ना. First you create and check whether it is appropriately creating your expected tables and all. If it is creating, then you can make it to update. So I'm uploading this project for you guys. Shall I override the same application, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, guys, go ahead and have a look into this.